Man, I could honestly spend all day talking about Monk, but you probably haven't got all day. So let's look at the talents. If you don't know already, I'm compiling playlists for every class in Mr. Pandaria with Druid and Paladin already underway. So if you want to know about some of the spec changes, talents, glyphs, and all of that jazz, obviously you can find them on the channel under the playlist section. This is the first one of the Monk, excluding the little overview of the Monk that I done a couple of months back. So if you haven't seen this video, feel free to go and check it out. Now the good thing about this is we don't need to focus on changes because everything that gets added for Monk, of course, is brand new. So let's just dive straight into the talent so you know what to expect. And you can almost start planning out what talents you're going to use on what boss in the pre-patch because we already know the Dragon Soul boss mechanics. And hopefully you might get a couple of resets in Dragon Soul using these bad boys. Of course not the level 90 talents, but certainly up to the level 75 talents. First of all, at level 15 is your movement talent. So you have Celerity, Tiger's Lust, and Momentum. Firstly, Celerity allows you to roll and chi torpedo more often, increasing their maximum number of charges by 1, and reduces the cooldown by 5. Now, if you're brand new to Monk, roll has a 20-second cooldown and it has 2 charges by default. So using Celerity will give you 3 charges on a 15-second cooldown. This can be particularly useful, don't get me wrong, and it's a useful talent, but really, you don't want to be rolling around that often. Instead, you'll probably want something that actually increases your movement speed to get from A to B that bit quicker. Tiger's Lust is one that I use 90% of the time because not only does it instantly clear the target, so it can be used on other people as well, removing immobilizing and movement impairing effects, but it increases movement speed by 70% for 6 seconds. Now this is only on a 30-second cooldown, so it's almost always there when you need it. It's a great way to clear slows without having to use PvP gloves, which if you didn't know, all snare effects will be cleared by using Roll, Chi Torpedo or Flying Serpent Kick. Obviously especially useful in PvP, but if you're just using these as part of your PvE gear anyway, it's a particularly useful equip to have. But Tiger's Lust is great, and the fact that you can use it on a tank or you can use it on someone who's slow at moving from a specific mechanic is amazing. What Momentum does, which is the final option, is every time you roll or chi torpedo, your movement speed is increased by 25% for 10 seconds. Now this stacks 2 times because you've got 2 charges of roll. So if you double roll, you're going to have a 50% movement speed increase for 10 seconds. Now Momentum is nice because it's kind of a fire and forget. If you're rolling to move out of a mechanic or you're rolling to move towards a stack of people that for a specific mechanic you're having to stack up for, you can get there that bit quicker. Again, Tiger's Lust is the one that I normally opt for though. Combining Tiger's Lust with a mouse over macro so you can put it on anyone that actually needs it. I mean, most of the time you're going to use it on yourself. It's incredibly strong. At level 30, you're going to get your healing talents, and these are actually used as far more than just healing, depending on what spec you are. Because if you're Windwalker or Brewmaster, these are actually a great way to fill that downtime between spending chi or gaining chi by using Jab or Keg Smash. Chi Wave firstly on a 15-second cooldown, which kind of is most Monks' default, causes a wave of chi to bounce 7 times. Now, this isn't always going to be on you because it is a smart heal. So firstly, it's going to damage the enemy, then it's going to bounce to somebody that needs healing, which hopefully is you if you're tanking. But as I say, it will just go to the person that needs the heal the most, then it's going to bounce back to the boss, and it does this 7 times. Most of the time as Windwalker, you're going to be using this, or you're going to be using Chi Burst, which we'll talk about in a minute. In all fairness, even as Brewmaster, most of the time, you're going to be using this. The only reason I'm not a big fan of it for Brewmaster is because when we get to Zen Sphere, which we'll talk about in a second, that is at least guaranteed healing on you. Whereas Chi Wave, it could bounce to someone else, and they're on, say, 85% health and you're on 90 or something. And really, you know, as the tank, you want the healing. So even though it does the most damage and the most healing, sometimes the healing's not going to actually go where you want it. But that's kind of just the drawback of it. But overall, it probably is the most well-balanced talent out of this row. So Zen Sphere is one that I do actually really like because it's guaranteed healing on you. It's going to do a hot, which is quite a low amount of healing. But of course, this scales with attack power, so the more vengeance you've got, the bigger you can get this heal to be ticking for. And every 2 seconds, it's going to do a small heal on you, a small bit of damage on the nearest enemy. And if you fall below 35%, or whoever you've put it on falls below 35%, it will detonate doing AoE damage and AoE healing around you in 10 yards. After 16 seconds, it will detonate anyway, so you don't have to fall below 35% health. But the really good thing about this is if you're able, you can actually keep this on 2 people. So because it's got a 10-second cooldown but lasts 16 seconds, you can actually have it on yourself, and then when it's off cooldown, you can put it on a second target, because this isn't limited to one target. So if both you and an off-tank are both getting slapped because maybe you're soaking a cleave, so it will be staggered healing, because it will be on you. After 16 seconds, it's going to blow up, but at that point, there's only about 10 seconds left before the off-tanks blow up, and then you put the new one on yourself. So it's like constant healing and constant AoE damage from 2 targets rather than 1. It takes a lot more finesse to play around, but I am a fan of Zen Sphere. And then finally, Chi Burst, which is basically your AoE. If you're all stacked up, you can do Chi Burst for huge amounts of healing, and if all the enemies are stacked up, it does huge amounts of damage. This for every spec is pretty much, is there AoE to do, or are we all stacked? Then you're going to run Chi Burst. Level 45 is your Chi/energy talents. So first of all, you've got Power Strike. So every 20 seconds, you gain Power Strikes, causing your next jab, Soothing Mist, Spinning Crane Kick, Expel Harm, or Crackling Jade Lightning to generate 1 additional Chi. If you're already at the maximum Chi, a Chi Sphere will be summoned near you. Now, this is a very easy passive, fire and forget. Every 20 seconds, you're going to get an extra Chi, but it's certainly not one I would use. The other 2 talents are definitely better than this. Ascension is a really nice one to use early on, especially when your haste levels are really low, because it increases your energy regen by 15%. But not only that, it increases the amount of Chi that you can have by 1, so you'll have 5 Chi instead of 4. This also increases your maximum mana by 15% if you're a Mistweaver, so actually as a Mistweaver, this is pretty good. In fact, it's really good if you're Fist Weaving, where you're going up and hitting the mobs to do healing, because you're going to have more mana to do that, you're going to have more Chi to do that, and because you're mainly focusing on Fist Weaving, the other 2 are kind of neither here nor there. Chi Brew is what I use for pretty much all 3 specs, to be honest with you. I do use Ascension more as a Brewmaster than I use Chi Brew, but Chi Brew for both Mistweaver and Windwalker, in my opinion, is the way to go. Because on a 45-second recharge with 2 charges, it instantly restores 2 Chi and generates 2 stacks of Tiger's Eye Brew, or if you're Mistweaver, it will be 2 stacks of Mana Tea. Now, Tiger's Eye Brew is what you consume as a Windwalker to do extra damage. It's basically your damage cooldown, but it's very short. You use it pretty much every 30 seconds. And then Mana Tea is what you use as a Mistweaver to be able to get mana back. Now, the big thing here is the 2 Chi. So let's use Windwalker as an example. On the pull, when you've got all your trinkets proccing and Bloodlust is probably being popped, you want to be able to get your Tiger's Eye Brew up as quick as possible. So being able to burn through Chi as quick as possible to get that Tiger's Eye Brew up and get the extra stacks from using Chi Brew as well means within 5 or 6 seconds, you can already be at 10 stacks, pop it, and start pumping. Whereas if you use the others, you're going to be missing all your burst on the pull when all of your trinkets are lined up. As I say, Bloodlust has probably been popped, and obviously that feels bad. And then as Mistweaver, getting the extra Mana Tea is absolutely amazing, but if you're playing Mistweaver properly, mana shouldn't really be much of an issue. Instead, being able to get those Chi on demand for more burst healing. So the way you're going to burst heal as a Mistweaver would be to have as many renewing mists, which is your hot. You have that out on as many people as possible, and then you're going to use Uplift, which is going to do an instant heal to anyone with renewing mist. Now, it costs 2 Chi to Uplift, so to be on 4 Chi and do double Uplift, Chi Brew, Uplift, Chi Brew, Uplift. It's just so much burst healing. I wouldn't play a Mistweaver without Chi Brew, because when you need that burst healing, it's always there. Now, of course, because it's got a recharge, you always want it on cooldown. So you always want to be wasting 1 charge, essentially, unless you know that there's about to be big healing coming in, or you're about to need maximum stacks of Tiger's Eye Brew and as much Chi as possible because you know a boss is about to have a damage amp phase or something like that, then you'll use it a bit more wisely. The next talents are just CC, and quite honestly, depending on the situation, will depend on which one you're going to use. But you've got Ring of Peace, which is a 45-second cooldown, and it forms a sanctuary around you or whoever you cast it on, and anyone who comes near them, they'll have a big circle around them, they'll get silenced and disarmed for 4 seconds. Now, this is an amazing talent for PvP, because if anyone's in your Ring of Peace and then tries to attack you or cast a spell on you, they're actually silenced or disarmed, depending on which one it is, for an additional 4 seconds as well, and this lasts 8 seconds in total. Now, there's some big pulls that you can do in Siege of Orgrimmar much later down the line, and really in Heart of Fear I can think of an area where you could use this as well, but in general, Leg Sweep is the way to go for PvE, and Ring of Peace for PvP. Charging Ox Wave is a 30-second cooldown where a mighty ox effigy rushes forwards 30 yards in front of you, stunning all enemies within its path for 3 seconds. Now, this is cool because it's a shorter stun and a shorter cooldown, so you can use it more frequently, but leg sweep is just a lot more reliable, because leg sweep's on a 45-second cooldown, and you knock all enemies down, effectively stunning them for 5 seconds. Now, quite honestly, the choice between the two if you want to stun is, if you're a Mistweaver and you don't ever fist weave, you're not going up in melee, you're just staying back and healing, then charging Oxwave is probably going to be better than leg sweep. But 90% of the times, even as a Mistweaver that's not fist weaving, you should be spending your time in melee, auto-attacking at the very least, maintaining your Serpent Zeal buff and stuff like that, which we'll get into in the Mistweaver specific video. I would say there's very few occasions where I talent out of leg sweep. Level 75 are your defensive talents, and these are what you're going to be changing almost on a fight-by-fight basis, especially if you're Brewmaster, but to be fair, even as the other two specs as well. Firstly, you've got Healing Elixirs, which is a passive where you can just select it and never need to think about it again, because every 18 seconds you gain Healing Elixirs. This heals you for 15% of your total health the next time a damaging attack brings you below 35%, or you drink a brew or a tea. Now, as all specs, you're drinking brews and teas very regularly, probably every 30 seconds at most. As a Brewmaster, you're using your Dodge Brew. As Mistweaver, you're using Mana Tea. As Windwalker, you're using Tiger's Eye Brew. So if you require healing because you've lost any health at all, you can almost guarantee that this is going to be very frequently used. However, the other two situationally are just better. Dampen Harm is definitely more for tanks than anything else, and there's many fights with hard-hitting bosses where it can be really useful. But on a 1.5 minute cooldown, it dampens you for 45 seconds, where the next 3 attacks, if the damage is equal to 20% or more of your total health, the attack is reduced in half. Now, a primary example early on in the phase where this will be absolutely amazing is Will of the Emperor, because the 2 bosses where you got a tank on each, these absolutely slap. They definitely hit you for more than 20% of your health per swing. So basically, Dampen Harm is going to get maximum effect here. And because they hit so slowly as well, it's an amazing talent for that. Whereas for Elegon, you would be using Diffuse Magic, because Diffuse Magic is kind of Cloak of Shadows for a rogue. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown. It reduces all spell damage taken by 90%, and clears all magic effects on you, reversing them back to the original caster instead, and this is within a 40-yard range if possible. But using Elegon as an example, he does a really, really powerful breath on the current tank. Diffuse Magic, it will do absolutely nothing to you. So as a tank, you'll be swapping these quite regularly. As maybe something like a Mistweaver or a Windwalker, you'll spend a lot more time with Diffuse Magic than any of the others, unless you need the passive healing from Healing Elixirs. Whereas Dampen Harm you'll use in niche circumstances, but nowhere near as often as Diffuse Magic, because on pretty much every fight you can guarantee there's going to be some form of magic damage that you can make use of this talent with. And then finally, the big boy level 90 talents. So you've got Rushing Jade Wind, Invoke Zuen the White Tiger, and Chi Torpedo. Now, depending on your spec, again, will depend on how often you use each one of these. The only one I would say that is completely useless most of the time for Windwalker and Brewmaster is Chi Torpedo. But you do see that I've got it talented at the moment in this build, so let's talk about that first, because I do use this a lot as Mistweaver. So what Chi Torpedo does is torpedoes a distance in front of you, dealing X amount of nature damage to all enemies and healing to all allies in your path. This does replace roll, and it travels further than roll as well. Now, an important thing about Chi Torpedo is if you jump before you press it, you're not going to go as far. So the main reason you'd be using this as a Mistweaver would be if you're all stacked, because it's completely free, it costs no mana at all, and you can get an extra charge with Celerity, meaning if everybody's stacked and you're Chi Torpedoing backwards and forwards throughout the group, it's a crap ton of free healing. In fact, on something like Spirit King's Heroic on 10-man, where you're stacked almost exclusively for the whole first boss, Chi Torpedo will be my top healing. So this can be incredibly strong situationally for Mistweaver, purely because it's free healing, and we all like free healing. I can't think of many, if any, use cases for Brewmaster and Windwalker, and that's mainly because if we touch on the AoE first, if everything's stacked, you're going to want to be using Rushing Jade Wind. So Rushing Jade Wind as a healer will do AoE healing around you and AoE damage around you. Now you can cast other abilities while you're doing it, because it basically just lasts as long as the cooldown is. So on AoE you can keep this up pretty much 100% of the time. It's quite mana intensive though as a healer, which which is why I prefer Chi Torpedo. But obviously, as a Windwalker or a Brewmaster, it just costs energy, and it does generate Chi as long as it hits 3 targets. Now, this replaces Spinning Crane Kick. So basically, if there's 3 targets or more, you want to almost just keep this up 100% of the time. As Brewmaster and Windwalker, if there's ever a time where there's more than 3 targets, and for a decent amount of time as well during the fight, then this is going to be the way to go. And then finally, invoke Zuen the White Tiger. Now, again, for both Brewmaster and Windwalker, this is absolutely amazing for single target, and this is what you're going to use. As Mistweaver, on fights where everybody's spread out and you can't make good use of Chi Torpedo or Rushing Jade Wind, so a couple of fights spring to mind, like Garrelon in Heart of Fear, even Stoneguard when you first walk into Mogoshon Vaults, because depending on how you do the fight, everybody could be spread out, or you might do the stacking tactic, in which case Rushing Jade Wind or Chi Torpedo would be viable. But there's definitely fights where you will be spread, and Invoke Zuen can even be good for Mistweaver, because every time it's hitting, it's actually doing healing as well. For Brewmaster, it does taunt the target, but you do get a pet bar, so you can actually disable this, and in most cases you would probably want to disable it. It doesn't taunt bosses, so don't think you're going to be able to solo tank fights and use your Zuen as an off tank, although that would be nice. But really, this is a DPS cooldown. As Brewmaster and Windwalker specifically, this is your big 3-minute single target cooldown. He does pretty good damage and scales off of your attack power, and that's incredibly important because as a Brewmaster, at that point where you reach massive levels of vengeance, you can pop Zuen and it's going to do a crap ton of damage. So as a Brewmaster, it's not something you're going to want to run in and pop instantly. You're going to want to wait until that vengeance has built up and up and up and up, so you've got maximum amounts of attack power, or a level of attack power that you're happy with, and then you're going to use it, and it can do millions of damage. Whereas for Windwalker, you haven't got vengeance, obviously, so you're really going to pop it with trinkets and weapon procs and things like that. Because it lasts for 45 seconds, you're going to want maximum time with your trinkets and everything up, because it does scale dynamically. You can't snapshot it because you can't really snapshot any guardians or pets anymore. So really, as a Windwalker, most of the time, you're just going to be using it on the pole, because that's when you can more or less guarantee that all your trinkets and everything are going to be available. Well, and that's it. That's the Monk talents. I really enjoyed talking about that because I enjoy talking about Monk all the time. For those of you that don't know, I'm rolling 3 Monks in MoP Classic. So in the pre-patch, I'll be leveling 3 Monks, 2 for our 2 10-mans and 1 for a 25-man. So yeah, I'm really excited. I absolutely love Monk for loads of Monk content. Eventually, this is going to be the channel to be on because I plan on putting out tons and tons of Monk content. So if you enjoyed this one, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any more. Like the video if you liked it, and I'll see you on the next one.